to be honest. Violent video games.
Our research question is there a relationship between violent video games, aggression, and physical violence?
Our thesis paragraph is violent video games substantially influence human minds. However, despite presenting cognitive benefits, they are mentally stimulating and altering, creating aggressive tendencies. Violent video games amend young growing minds by diminishing the perception of the rational differentiation between virtual reality and reality, causing the uncertainty of inheriting violence into real life. These young adults are exposed to mature content such as guns, aggression, drugs, and dark imagery, which can lead to mental health disorders, minimizing the brain's regions.
Alright, so the first thing we're going to talk about is virtual reality versus actual reality. And virtual reality is a world behind a camera which releases dopamine from your brain, meaning that you get happy chemicals and you just feel good from playing a VR video game. And VR alters a child's mind, making them think that real reality is the same way as virtual reality, meaning that if they're in the street or something like that and they see a person who they don't like, that they will be just as aggressive as they would in virtual reality. And virtual reality makes aggression more acceptable for a child. They think that if they can do it online, that it is acceptable in the real world, which is not true and is very bad for a child to get into virtual reality. And then the negative themes in VR are there's a lot of killing of people or animals, which is just not good for children to see as they're growing up. There's a lot of abuse, drugs, criminal behavior, sexual exploitation, racial, sexual, and gender stereotypes, and then a lot of foul language. And then cognital aggression is the aggression that is planned and intended. So it is basically just a child planning on creating aggression in the future, and that is formed from a lot of your violent video games like Call of Duty, Dead by Daylight, and sometimes even GTA. And then cognitive aggression does not always have to be physical, it can also be emotional and just abuse along the mental side. And then there are 3 types of non-physical aggression, which is verbal aggression, which is like name calling, just saying anything verbal that is just mean to a person. There's relational aggression, meaning like friends, family, anybody you are around at more than one point in time. And then there's social aggression, which is mainly gossiping or just not treating people right in a social stance.
So our next topic, we just went over aggression. Despite presenting cognitive benefits, violent video games are mentally stimulating and alerting, creating aggressive behaviors. The text that I read from the website I got, there was a quote about how do you say that word?
Specifically?
Yeah, that word. Younger children apply more physical aggression than older children, and then the younger children are more rational. They're also more aggressive the younger they are. So you start a kid off at like the age of 5 playing aggressive video games, and as they grow up, they're just going to continue to be aggressive. They're going to continue to think that that's okay, and that those actions that they're doing are acceptable. There's a lot of aggressive games that are now being played and are very popular. There are Dead Space 2, Mortal Kombat, Call of Duty, Fallout. Again, with the early childhood exposure to media violence, there was multiple studies done, and then the evidence suggests that there's a link between the increased aggression and then self-regulation problems. Again, starting from a young age of children playing with these video games. As you can see in the picture, even it's just a child getting upset, or not upset, but acting or yelling at the screen thinking it's okay. And then the 2 kids sitting together, the younger one even watching the older one play the video games. They're not that old, but they think it's okay, and I think that's the video games is what actually happens in real life.
All right, our next topic is the more the exposure, the greater the increase in violence. And So this graph is what is known as the general aggression model, and it suggests that violent video games constitute an antecedent variable of aggressive behavior, and that just means as one increases, so does the other. And so as the violent video game exposure is higher, so is the belief about violence and aggression. And then you can also see there's a factor of family environment. So a low family environment, like, makes the violent behavior increase a lot more than a stable family environment on top of a lot of exposure. And then the violence from overexposure is reciprocated into social groups. And it says that the study shows that not only players of violent video games have an increase in violence, but so do their peers. People often spread their ideas and thinking through their peers. So a lot of times they play these games together, and they interact like in school or different social settings. And it shows as it increases in exposure and the amount of like interaction with other people, you can see the darker line means like they have more contact with other people about it, and you can see like it's a steeper increase in terms of like them and their friends progression versus like somebody that just plays it alone. Like it's not a very steep line.
And then our next topic is mental health in relation to screen time. So when psychologists are trying to get to a cause of what makes a person aggressive/violent or want to take out their anger, they look at the person's mental health. It should not come as a surprise with how much it is put in the public eye that depression, anxiety, and self-esteem has to do with a person becoming aggressive and violent. Screen time has now become known to cause more anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. Studies have shown that replacing as little as an hour of screen time with physical activity has shown great effects to lowering depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. The physical activity does not have to be intense. A simple leisure walk around the neighborhood would be sufficient. Out of the 3 mental illnesses listed above, low self-esteem seems to be the most influential to aggressive, violent behavior. Looking at the chart, you can see that replacing screen time with physical activity can reduce the risk of low self-esteem by 84%.
And then next would be Chase.